Go ahead, Councillor Ivanova.
Councillor Ivanova, I just want to let you know I'm logging on to WebEx right now, but I'm on the phone right now. Thank you.
Okay, great. It's 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call this special council meeting of Wednesday, July 29th to order. This council meeting is convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, the City of Vancouver Electronic Meetings Regulation. As such, council members are participating by phone, and as chair of this meeting, I am also participating by phone. And if I could just ask folks to mute, just to double check that you're muted, so we can just cut down on background noise, that would be great. This council meeting has been called to consider a pilot for liquor consumption in public places and the necessary amendments to the City Land Regulation Bylaw number 8735 regarding consumption of liquor on city land to enable the pilot. Please note, if my connection is lost during any portion of this meeting, we will recess the meeting until my connection is restored. If council loses connection during the voting process, we have staff on hand to facilitate you getting back online quickly. Contact information has been sent your way. Council are also reminded that we need to ensure there is quorum during the meeting, so please make sure your video is enabled. The live stream of this meeting will continue with audio only. Presentations and vote results will be projected to viewers, however, when available. Lastly, we have speakers who will be providing comments to council by phone, and a moderator will assist in patching the speakers through when their turn comes. As always, we acknowledge we're on the unceded traditional territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and thank them for having care for this land and being so generous to all who live here. I also want to thank the staff for the amazing work, especially during COVID-19. I think I've lost track about how many virtual council meetings and public hearings and special council meetings and in-camera meetings we've had over the last couple of months, but just wanted to thank all of staff for all their work during these tough times. If we have the roll call, please, clerk.
Yes, Mayor Stewart in the chair. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor DiGenova.
Present.
Councillor Fry.
Here.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly.
Present.
And Councillor Kirby-Yung.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much. The public is strongly urged to listen to the proceedings via the city's website and to follow along on Twitter at VanCityClerk for updates on the progress of the meeting. Any comments on the agenda items can be sent using the web form on the city's website, and that's the link is tweeted out at VanCityClerk. Speakers have 5 minutes to make comments and should limit their comments to the merits of the report being considered and to say whether or not you support or oppose the recommendations. Our business for this special council meeting is to consider a report outlining recommendations for a pilot for liquor consumption in public places and related necessary amendments to the City Land Regulation Bylaw number 8735 regarding consumption of liquor on city land. We're going to start with a presentation, and here to present via phone, we have Margaret Witkins, the Deputy General Manager of Engineering. And I think you have a bunch of slides for us to see.
Sorry, point of privilege.
Yes, Councillor Fry. Sorry, Councillor Wiebe.
Yeah, I want to declare a conflict on this issue because currently the provincial bylaws allow for alcohol sales outside of a couple establishments that I'm involved in, and they would be able to go to these zones. So I'm going to have to call conflict of interest.
Okay, thanks very much, and we'll just wait for you to leave the meeting and just remind the clerk to mark Councillor Wiebe as such when we're just recording the voting results. Thank you, and we can turn it over to the staff now for the presentation. And I see your slides are up on the public screen, so we're all ready
Mr. Mayor, if I might just jump in,
sure.
City Manager here. I just wanted to say firstly, thanks to you for calling the special council meeting. We are kind of really running with this, and we had hoped to get it done for the last council meeting. And so thanks for accommodating us and getting this done today. And I just really want to say, reiterate your comments to say thanks to the staff team who are working creatively to put out expressions of interest to the BIAs and get their interests, and to come up with some creative ideas that you'll see today. So thanks to them for working so quickly. So I'll hand it over to Margaret, who's been leading the staff team on this.
Thanks very much, City Manager.
Great. Thank you, Sadhu, and also to Mayor and Council for calling this meeting today to hear our recommendations on the pilot for alcohol consumption in public spaces. This forms part of as you know, a body of work that we've been advancing at fast pace based on your direction to look at how we can use our public spaces in new and innovative ways to support community and business recover from COVID. And so we are very excited to be here today to present some of the work that we've been able to develop over the past several weeks to have something in time for this summer. So for today's presentation, we'll touch on a bit of background, describe the pilot at an overview level, and then get into some more detail on the specific sites, as well as other considerations and some of the work that would follow should Council choose to approve this today. I'll start us off and then pass it off to Lisa Parker, the branch manager of street activities, to walk through some of the detail. As we've already recognized, this work was really born on June 23rd when Council passed a motion to ask staff to look at designating public spaces for consumption of alcohol. And so over the last month, we've worked quickly to develop what would be achievable this summer as part of a pilot, really being guided by several goals that the staff team developed based on the council motion. So there's an aspect around supporting business recovery, providing greater opportunities for businesses to offer takeout and a more attractive option to be in a plaza with able to consume alcohol. The social connectivity that comes with those types of experiences, as well as the opportunity to promote equitable treatment of public space users. For example, increasing the opportunity for legal drinking in public for those that lack outdoor public spaces as part of their own residences, knowing that it is safer to be socializing outdoors through COVID, as well as the opportunity for legal consumption of alcohol for those who may be more likely to experience stigma associated with drinking in public. On the other side, of course, we also know that there are some considerations that we've heard from Vancouver Coastal Health, as well as Vancouver Police Department. There's implications around enabling public drinking in kind of a binge drinking culture. And the specific impacts that might have in the context of a pandemic, where that activity might add an increased burden on our hospital services. From the VPD input, we are aware that management of public spaces and the safety of them is quite important, and that increased liquor service can increase the burden on our VPD resources. So just at an overview level, knowing that we were limited on time and also recognizing that this is a highly complex topic, we wanted to make sure that we were making the most of the partnerships and the knowledge that we have with community partners and BIAs. And so what we did was solicit input from BIAs and businesses on what the best candidate sites would be for this pilot based on some of the criteria that we developed through engagement. And the benefit of those partnerships also is that it would enable some contribution towards the ongoing management and stewardship of the sites. You'll see today that we are bringing forward 4 pilot sites, and that for each of those, we will have a management and a monitoring plan, and that the pilot is proposed to end on October 12th, which was developed in alignment with our conversations with Park Board. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa Parker, who will walk through more of the specifics of the pilot.
Thank you. This is Lisa Parker. And so as an overview of what we've accomplished to date, following the June 23rd motion, we did connect with Vancouver Coastal Health, VPD, as well as Park Board to understand those considerations and concerns that would allow us to shape and move forward with criteria. With that, we also continued with engagement with a number of internal departments within the city itself. From that, we generated criteria for 3 categories: spatial around the locations, management and stewardship, as well as monitoring. With that, we were able to develop and release an expression of interest, which was sent to our BIAs. From that, we did receive proposals that we were able to quickly evaluate against that criteria. We've developed the bylaw amendment, which we will be presenting today. And recognizing that that June 23rd motion did include specific recognition for the Italian heritage through a piazza direction, following that, today's council is really around approval of locations. And with that, we will continue to work to integrate that additional programming and extra layering in with some of the considerations as we do move forward. As an overview for the criteria, from a spatial or a location perspective, looking at the technical suitability of the locations, we wanted to ensure that we had criteria that could stand up against the proposals. We really started to recognize that ideally a small neighborhood scale plaza in a commercial area would be ideal, as it would offer visible and accessible locations for individuals to enjoy and visit. Or if we were looking at a larger area, we could actually designate a smaller portion of the plaza. Proximity to transit, public washrooms, overnight parking if needed, as well as just easy access to food primary was also something that we developed in that criteria. For management and stewardship, really, this was a critical part informed by our discussions with Vancouver Coastal Health and VPD, understanding the roles and responsibilities of the city as well as our partner. It really started to recognize the need for a management plan involving cleaning and waste management, as well as having information on site about rules of the space, but as well as information for harm reduction. Monitoring is a critical part that we've developed, and it's a 5-part approach that we are proposing. It really is our way of informing the day-to-day management of the sites, as well as allowing us to collect data to understand the longer-term considerations. For monitoring, we are looking at collecting information through a 311 reporting. Vancouver Coastal Health will be bringing in data from an individual and community health perspective. Vancouver Police can offer us information through the pilot on alcohol and site-specific incidences, both through our non-emergency and emergency contact information. We will also be working with our partners for an observational data collection, and this will be a non-surveillance approach where we can actually go out and really observe the uses of that. And some of the ideas that we could be collecting data on would be the numbers of people there, what are the activities, what are the behaviors that are seen, as well as an online forum for public feedback, and we will have information on signage within each location for understanding how they can access that. Next, I'll go through the 4 proposed pilot locations. For these, we are proposing a timeline or a time of day between 11 a.m. and 9 p.m., except for one location, and I will detail that. The first location was a proposal with from DVBIA for Lot 19, which is the plaza at Hornby and Hastings. It is a central location and it's well managed. Some of the considerations we'd like to highlight is the gradient changes within the space. We will need to work to secure access to public washroom. There are some specific management considerations for this, as well as this is a location for potential piazza interest that the city will ensure that we move forward with following location directions. And here's a map of the location. Second proposed location is one of our existing pavement to plazas at Butte and Robson. This was a proposal with the Robson BIA. The opportunities here is that it is a known public space, it is well used, and we do have an existing and management and stewardship plans in place. A consideration for this location would be to secure access to a washroom. And here is the location. It is on Butte between Robson and the Lane. third location is one of the pop-up plazas that the city has worked to install recently. It is from the Cambie Village BIA at Cambie and 17th. With it being in for a short period of time, we are seeing that it is already well used, but this could be an additional way to activate this space, and we would work and adjust on the existing management plan. A consideration for this one is also securing public washroom access. And this is at Cambie at West 17th. And the fourth proposal is at Shuqualnuck Square. This is on the north side of the Vancouver Art Gallery. The partner the proposal was with DVBIA. Some of the opportunities is the central location. It is well managed and well used. And there is the existing public washroom there. Some considerations for this one is its location on the busy arterial along Georgia Street. Vancouver Police Department does have specific concerns around this location, really rooted in the fact that it is a large space that is very well used, and it is frequently used for civic use as far as demonstrations. And the acknowledgement of that, if that's combined with alcohol, could present very specific issues for this location. So to help mitigate, but admittedly not completely addressing those concerns, we are proposing for this location for council's consideration to have limited hours between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m., as well as a smaller delineated space. So here it would be within the area where the existing picnic tables have been installed, not the entire plaza. A few other considerations that we do want to bring to council's attention on this is that in order to advance this pilot quickly for this summer, we are relying heavily on our existing partnerships with the local BIAs, both from the proposals, but as well as implementing and managing these locations. So we really want to acknowledge that this first iteration would be very business focused. And as well, from a social equity perspective, we do recognize the importance of public space as an opportunity to really offer the opportunity to decriminalize and destigmatize people that are often experiencing a lot of disproportionate level of policing. And we see this, if it were to move forward, as a chance to at least initiate that discussion, recognizing that there is really valuable engagement to be had on that subject. Pending council's approval, the next steps for this pilot would be to finalize the communications plan. Each location, we will have a partner agreement, and we would produce the signage to be installed on site and other resources needed depending on the locations, operationalize on August 10th, and then move forward with the web survey and the additional ways for public engagement. So we're bringing forward today for council's consideration the bylaw amendment that would allow for this in these specific locations, and we're here for discussion and questions.
Great. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's make sure I'm off mute. Yes, I am. Okay. Thank you very much for the very thorough report. So, council, we now we do have one speaker to hear, but at this point, you can feel free to ask questions to staff if you have any questions from council to staff. I have Councillor Kirby-Yung. Councillor Kirby-Yung, please go ahead up to 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the report and the overview. Appreciate it. I wonder, the cost was noted at $10,000 to $20,000 per site, and I wonder if you can speak to why that's so significant when the BIAs are taking on the majority of management and stewardship, I believe you referenced.
Yes, Lisa here. And so the range that we've put up there is for signage as well as for the waste management of that location. So there would be the partnership would be an important part, but this would be allow for us to take on our role of signage for rules and regulations, as I said, additional outreach for through the signage for harm reduction as well as the waste management and cleanliness.
And so is it felt that the existing waste management needs to be augmented, that the normal services around that area are not going to be sufficient? Is that part of the projection?
So we're looking at this as really a chance to learn what will be involved, and so this is an estimate of what we're potentially anticipating, but we're really going into this as a learning opportunity for the pilot from all of the mechanisms, including potential sanitation increases.
Okay. On the VAG North Plaza hours and suggesting that those be limited in response to concerns that were brought forward by VPD, Is the thinking that if that's a site where there's other protests or other activity that happens, that other activity happens more earlier in the day, or why were those limited hours selected specifically at 4 to 9 versus not the afternoon, for example, or 11 to 4, or earlier in the day? Can you provide some color on that?
Yes, so Lisa here again. We did get information from Vancouver Police around looking at 2019 as far as the number and time of day that a lot of protests did happen, recognizing that they're not limited for that. Many of them were on the weekends and during the day, but not entirely. It doesn't entirely address that issue, but we thought it would at least allow forward with them and attempt to mitigate the issues.
So was it just that these were more leisure hours, I guess I'm like, why 4 to 9 and not 6 to 9 or 12 to 5, or?
More leisure hours that were proposed.
Okay, and then it not starting for 2 weeks, is that simply the amount of time to produce and install signage, or to allow the BIA's time to set up?
I would say it's for operationalizing, and so there would be things for the city to install, as well as for the BIA's to generate for their specific locations.
Okay, and I know that you mentioned that you had consulted with the park board in doing this, and we're looking in terms of their locations, trying to be complementary. The park board had their meeting Monday night. They did approve the 22 sites, but it looks like based on regulations and the legal route that they chose to take over the 2 options, that it's highly unlikely that they're going to have a pilot until next summer. It's possible, but unlikely. Would that have changed the locations that you would have brought forward?
No, we did coordinate with Parks Board from a criteria perspective, ensuring that our criteria did not have differing inputs as compared to theirs. We also did share the proposals that we did receive from the Parks Board to ensure that there was not direct overlap, which there was not. But we wouldn't have. It's not as if we declined any of our proposed locations based on Parks Board coverage.
Okay, and recognizing that 3 of these are downtown. Was there, and you were relying on sort of in this test phase on expression of interest from willing BIAs that were, had the capacity to operationalize, but was there any opportunity to have some equity and spread out to other areas of the city?
So we did rely on the proposals that did come in as opposed to the city choosing proposing locations. And that was really around timing for engagement, recognizing that we wanted to pilot this summer. Choosing locations that the city initiated would have required more engagement.
Okay, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Next, Councillor Boyle, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, and thanks to staff for the very quick work on this. I am interested in focusing in on the washrooms, and it seems to me like an increase in access to public washrooms is a great additional benefit of this work. I'm hoping that staff can just confirm that those washrooms would be universal and wheelchair accessible, and also wondering if they would be open and available 24 hours a day, even if the hours for the specific alcohol consumption pilot are not 24 hours.
Yes, regarding washrooms, so for each location, I think with the partners, we're identifying different opportunities. It is worth highlighting that some of the locations are very likely to need to rely on porta potties as opposed to a built infrastructure. If we do need to do that, we would ensure that we have a porta potty that is fully accessible, as you suggested there. We will also want to make sure that we do learn lessons from a safety perspective of porta potties that we've learned through the pandemic, and so we would be moving forward with that being a part of our consideration as to how we actually keep those safe for a variety of users in there without having a set of eyes on them.
Okay, great. That sounds great. And my other question on the washroom piece is, I guess, if the pilot is ending in October, but it turns out, as has been discussed many times, that increased access around town to public washrooms is of benefit, is there a possibility that those washroom facilities would stay in those spaces beyond the time of the pilot?
specifically regarding the washrooms, the city doesn't support an ongoing reliance on porta potties, so we would want to work with the BIAs and the neighboring businesses on the successes that we are learning, if they're presuming through the pilot, and really recognize how can we start to unlock the opportunities for access to public washrooms as a meaningful way across the city.
Okay, that are more permanent than porta potties, but a longer term solution.
Correct. We see this as only an interim measure if needed, and we would look for a longer term solution that we could develop with our partners.
Okay, really appreciate that. Thank you. And those are all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to staff for the quick turnaround. I'm just wondering if there's anyone available from VPD to answer questions.
I believe there is.
It's Howard Chow. I'm available if you can hear this.
Hi, Howard. Yes, I just wanted to pursue the question around the time frame set out for the plaza in front of the art gallery. The question was raised earlier about the rationale for keeping it from 4 to 9. And I'm just wondering if there's, from your perspective, any flexibility to accommodate 12 to 9, and the context being is that this is sort of a summer pilot, people going and enjoying a lunch meal. We do have people, being tourists in their own town, as well as from the rest of BC still coming to Vancouver, and whether we could accommodate that, and do you think that could be done reasonably?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair question, and I really do want to say that we've worked very closely with Margaret and Lisa on this, who've been fabulous to deal with, so thank you for them. But I'll tell you, it's about, if there was no other choice but to approve it, because we are opposed to this, then it's best that we shrink the time. And there's a number of reasons as to why we're suggesting we shrink the time, is that we have about 3 to 4 protests a week that take place where the art gallery is the center of it. It takes place on the north side. We've had lots of, opposing groups that have shown up there. And when we mix alcohol or throw alcohol into the mix, the expectation is we're going to have problems there. As well, with alcohol, you're bringing in the objects that they're going to be throwing. We've got lots of reported incidents where, bear spray, knifing incident, things like that take place during these protests. So it's a concern for us when we're asking for that location.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think I appreciate the considerations there. I'm raising it because I'm thinking about that sort of noon hour, sort of early afternoon time that people are venturing out in the summer. And I guess just a follow-up to staff, and thank you for that, Howard. A question to staff around, were there other locations that we identified that might be in future sort of opportunity sites? I recognize you did an expression of interest, but thinking about it from an equity lens across the city?
Lisa here. Really what we're approaching is we're seeing this, the pilot locations that did emerge through the proposals from the BIAs, they actually take on a few of the typologies of our public space. For example, a larger plaza where we delineate a smaller portion of it, or Butte Robson, which is one of our pavement to plazas. So it's really allowing us to see the successes and learn from the typologies of the spaces. From that, as we do collect data and hear feedback, I think we can move forward with a more informed way of looking at spaces across the city from an equity perspective.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Swanson, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah. What does signage for harm reduction mean?
Yeah, so what we want to do is to be able to have signage on site where, from a safety perspective, as an example, if I'm a woman coming through this space, but I'm not comfortable calling for police for support, what are other organizations and ways that I could reach out for support? As well as from a user, a substance use perspective, a way to reach out for support for an individual where they're not really relying on like the city, or not having to call 311 or to call the police, where there's often stigma for that relationship.
So you'd have a sign that said, call Battered Women's Support Services, or call, what are you going to have other numbers up there for people to call?
Yes, so we would have a number of resources, and that content is being developed with basically what the input is coming from Vancouver Coastal Health for that information that we could have on site for the users.
What work have you done to ensure that lower income people who might not be buying their booze in local establishments but bringing it will be treated as equitably as others?
That was an important part that we issued in the expression of interest to the BIs, is to ensure that there was an understanding that this space will be for our entire public. We can work together if there's behavioral issues, but we don't want to have any isolation or exclusion for people. And that really is the intention of the buying your own alcohol and coming there, as well as somebody else could, if they wanted to, visit a patio where you're actually exclusively visiting a restaurant. This offers an opportunity for somebody that doesn't feel comfortable or can't afford to join into this plaza.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bly.
Thank you very much, and thanks to staff for this quick turnaround. I am supportive of this initiative and voted accordingly, but I just want to reflect, and it's helpful that Deputy Chief Chow is on the line. Can we just address some of the public questions around the nuance of public drug use and this bylaw change, the level of work and sort of, I don't want to say restrictions, but careful considerations. And some people are a little confused. It came up around the park board initiative too, around drinking, and we've seen that there's been some criticism around this dichotomy between vulnerable folks and public drug use and less vulnerable, but and around public drinking. And I just wonder if we can add some color to that for the
Can you, sorry, Councillor Bly, who's your question directed to?
It could be directed to staff, but also just noting that Deputy Chief Chow is on the line, so that could be a helpful.
Okay, let's start with staff first on this one. Yeah, thank you.
Lisa, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I would. Deputy Chief Chow, I was hoping you might be able to take a first crack at that one.
I can if you'd like.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Sure, Mayor. So, you know, just in terms of the open drug use that's taken place, we've decriminalized, despite what some media reports or some of the general consensus out there. We're not charging people for possession. That's not our focus. That's not, and it hasn't been probably for the past decade. I think we charged 6 people last year because of additional charges that stemmed from that particular investigation. So if the thought is that we're going to be actively, aggressively policing drinking and or, you know, that drug use, open air drug use, it won't be. Our resources will be focusing on other things. I'm hoping that's the question that you're asking, or I can clarify if you'd like.
Is that good, Councillor Bly?
Yeah, I know further clarification would be helpful if there was more to say there.
Anything else, Deputy Chief?
You know, like, I mean, I think, you know, just in terms of the drug use, and I know that this has come up together in the same conversation with some in the media, but quite honestly, you know, even with the drug use that's taking place in other areas of town, it has not been the focus. The focus has been on drug traffickers, on organized crime, on that aspect of it. So I don't see that part of it really factoring into the bringing in of this this bylaw.
Okay, that's fine. That's
okay.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And another question I have is just around, could staff clarify the rationale for the timing of, I think I heard 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., but it went rather quickly through the slides, for the north side of the art gallery?
Yeah, so for Shukluk Plaza, the proposal is 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And the other 3 locations, the proposal is 11 a.m. to 9 p.m.
And just clarifying the rationale for the difference in time?
And so specifically for Shucknook Plaza, looking at an opportunity to mitigate but not fully address the concerns that were raised by Vancouver Police around the issue of combining alcohol with protesting and that civic demonstration. And we looked at the data of when most of the demonstrations are, not all, but they did tend to be more during the day. And so our proposal for your consideration was to at least limit the hours to not at least highlight that opportunity during the majority of the times that the protests are happening.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. And then one other question is around the sites that were chosen. I appreciate that there was buy-in from the BIAs to designate these locations. I just wonder, some of them have many restaurants around them, but I would say a couple really don't have that many, and I'm wondering if we're setting up like a place to drink versus having this sort of natural space where people would, like waiting outside of a restaurant for a table, for example, would be allowed to have a drink while they wait or something like that. I'm thinking there's a number of places that are not listed here. Are we meeting?
Just 15 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Again, looking at the typologies of those relationships from these, we could learn moving forward for the pilot if there was further consideration around what is the meaningful relationships for plazas to consider.
Okay, thanks so much. That's the 5. Okay, thank you. Councillor DeGenova, up to 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, thanks. My first question will be for the city manager, and it's just regarding the Italian piazza, the Italian-themed piazza. This was actually a separate motion that was moved forward in June of 2019 and targeted to be completed in June of 2020. I know that there's some work being done, appreciate what staff have included, but that wasn't meant to be BYOB. It was meant to have sort of some partners involved where people could purchase alcohol from restaurants that perhaps had a cart or a food truck set up, and there'd be a designated space that they could drink that alcohol. It would be a pilot. So considering that's a separate motion, but the motion that got us here included that would be one of the first pilots. If it doesn't work out this time around, I was hoping that staff could please tell me if that would come forward by next summer, if there could be an expectation of that.
Yeah, thanks. I can take an initial crack at that, and then the team can jump in. I think the idea here is given that we've got the BIA interest for these sites to kind of pilot the concept and try to pull together some of the components of what would be a piazza, an Italian piazza at that location, and ideally learn from it for future applications, and even maybe get other BIAs interested in that kind of approach. So I think we're hoping we can get, assuming that like the Italian Cultural Center and the DVBIA would be interested, that we'd be able to pilot it for the summer still, and then that could obviously have implications for the future.
All right, I have lots of other questions, so maybe I'll take that offline with staff, but understanding that motion unanimously passed last year asked that staff work with, it wasn't just for applications, it was that staff work with different stakeholders to get that accomplished. Happy to take that offline moving forward, and thanks so much, Mr. Johnston, for your answer to that. I'm just going to try and be fast, hoping I can get this done in one round. If not, I'll be asking for a second round of questions and moving a motion. But my second question would be if I could direct it towards Vancouver Police Department, and it would be about any concerns with some of the larger protests, and not maybe even just protests, and then people being able to, or being down there drinking their own liquor, but is there any concern about special events and people saying, hey, bring, BYOB or bring your own personal alcohol, and we're going to have an event down here without permits, and it becomes kind of like a quote-unquote protest like 420 is?
No, I think that's a reality with any of the sites. I think, social media can get the information out there really quickly. You can gather a crowd really quickly, and that's where we run into problems. I don't want to fearmonger and suggest that this is, going to, in every instance, it's going to create problems, but it is out of the, I know it's separate, but the 22 sites with the parks, when we did the workup on each site, we said, go ahead, that's fine, there's no issues. And even on the 4 here, this is the only one out of, 25, 26 that we've got concerns of, and it's for that protest factor. I get it, it's a lovely space and all that, but that's our concern on this particular location.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm just thinking about sort of a couple of streets over from that location when we look at sort of the Granville Entertainment District and thinking about sort of some of the things that we've heard from Bar Watch and Good Night Out. Were they consulted in sort of the formation of this report? And then also, I guess this is a question for VPD and for our staff, but is there any concern that, you know, there might be some of the safety issues, especially for women or for vulnerable people, as we see in the Granville Entertainment District? So if VPD could answer that, and as well as our staff, if Bar Watch, Good Night Out was consulted, and any other stakeholders that have often raised those concerns and issues.
Yeah, and I spoke on that before as well, so not to rehash all of it, but just to suggest that that was a concern, was underage drinking, vulnerable people when they've been, you know, intoxicated people, and vulnerable women. I mean, the same premise as to why the city supporting Good Night Out is because of that aspect, and this is what's going to happen with some of the open spaces where liquors can be brought in that are unsupervised and unchecked.
Okay, and then thanks so much. Just hurrying through this. Deputy Chief Chow, I'll just ask this now, and I can ask as a point of information through my discussion time, but wondering about drinking and driving. Are we concerned that people will be coming downtown from other cities, municipalities? This is a metro-wide approach. So I'll leave you with that for now and can ask a point of information during my question times, perhaps. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Bly, you've had your 5 minutes. Did you have something else you wanted to?
Actually, I was going to move for another round of questions, but I can ask a couple.
Second.
Okay.
So is that an actual motion to?
Yeah, I do have another couple of questions.
Okay, so I'll do yeas and nays. It's been seconded by Councillor Dejanova. All in favor of a second round of questions, say yay.
Yay.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bly, a fresh 5 minutes. Go right ahead.
Thanks very much. I'm just curious if any BIAs expressed interest in expanding this pilot beyond the 4 locations to support all of their businesses rather than one specific area.
If I'm understanding your question, do you mean expanding in like multi-blocks and larger general swaths of neighborhoods? To answer that, no, we didn't hear that as a request. Admittedly, in our expression of interest, I think we were more prescribed around it being a specific plaza scale consideration. So I would say that would be the proposals that we got were a response to the constraints and criteria that we did generate through that.
Okay, and just to clarify, thank you for that, that this is sort of in essence, a BYOB type of proposal.
Correct. So it would be a designated spot, and we would have signage in there saying that within this space you can bring your own alcohol and consume that.
Okay. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Dejanova, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks.
Again,
I'm not
go
sure,
ahead.
Deputy Chief Chow, if you got that last question that I tried to slip in there, but just wondered if you might be able to elaborate on that a little bit.
Can you just?
Yes, unimpaired drive. Oh, sorry.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
That's okay. Oh, go right ahead, Deputy Chief.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I mean, that would be a concern. We still have counterattacks been going on for the last 2 months, where we're setting up counterattack roadblocks, and we're still seeing it's a problem despite all the media and everything else that's been going on for a long time. So that would be a concern, as well as drinking, driving after they've left places like that, as any place as well, any liquor establishment.
All right. Would it be less of a concern, and sorry to put you on the spot, maybe you can answer, maybe you can't, but if we saw sort of other Metro Vancouver municipalities doing this across the entire region, right now the City of North Van's doing it, but if we saw each of them doing some of these pilots, would you be as concerned that we'd have as many people coming into Vancouver to do this?
You know, I think it'd probably lessen the impact to some degree, but I mean, quite honestly, I think people love coming to Vancouver. It's such a beautiful city, so I don't know that we won't become that core city attraction anyways.
And then what would the impact be on your resources?
Well, I can tell you that they're not to sound like a broken record, but it will tap into us. Difference with going to like an intoxicated person, in particular when they're juveniles in a park, it's not a matter of just going and dealing with it like an adult. Hey, get in the cab, go home. With a juvenile, you're sitting there sometimes multiple hours while you're waiting for the parent to show up. So it is time consuming, and you're not going to have one officer there. You're going to have multiple officers that are there. So it will create impact that way, undoubtedly.
Okay, thanks. Good to consider. I'm wondering if we have anyone from Vancouver Coastal Health on the line.
I'm not sure. Clerks or a city manager, anybody from Vancouver Coastal Health?
Mr. Mayor, I don't believe we have Vancouver Coastal Health participating today. Margaret, is that the case?
Lisa here. That is correct. We extended the invitation and they were not able to join.
Okay. I'd be interested to know, I know that there was some talk about possibly sending us some information on increased emergency room visits. I didn't see that particularly in the report, so could staff maybe reach out to them to get that information that Dr. Daly had talked about in her presentation a couple of months back?
Yes, we will follow up on that, and that is one of the data points that would be collected from individual and community health data that Vancouver Coastal Health will collect during this, but I will also reach out for the existing data as you requested.
Thanks so much. And then just to sort of, and I really appreciate the work staff have put into this and how quickly you've delivered on this coming back. I know that we're trying to move things forward really fast here. And that's what council's directed you to do. But I did have a question specifically towards the equity piece and that issue. Alcohol is a drug. We've heard about the effects and the concerns of Vancouver Coastal Health on that. But nicotine is also a drug, and we limit smoking. I know that there are some individuals who can't. Mr. Mayor, can you stop my timer for a moment?
Keep going.
Oh, thank you. All right. Sorry, I heard someone's phone ringing. I just looking at this from an equity perspective. There are renters that have to sign agreements that can't smoke inside of their apartments. We don't allow people to smoke on parks and beaches. Has there been any equity consideration for people who smoke? Considering we allow nicotine to be sold in the city of Vancouver, I would assume that, we say you can't smoke it sort of in these public spaces and places. Have we considered a similar equity approach for those who rely on nicotine and cigarettes? I'm not a smoker myself, but the question's been raised to me considering this.
And so for that, not specific to the public consumption portion of this from plazas in general, they are, the smoking portion is really dictated by the street and traffic bylaw as far as limits of where you can and cannot smoke. For example, you cannot smoke within the 6 meters of an air intake or a doorway, and those are the rules that do apply for the plazas as well. There is not specific regulations around smoking within these the plazas, either permanent or pop-up.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm just looking at, have you looked overall at the city of Vancouver and at possibly an approach for equity on that? So maybe I can ask that in my closing as a point of information. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor Fry, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And thanks, staff, for all the rapid work on this. I know there was a few delays in getting this off the ground, and I appreciate that you managed to pull this out before the August break. One of the pieces that was sort of articulated, and I'm just sort of grappling with how we frame this around also opportunities for enjoyment of food, and some of the, like we talked about in the motion, talked about having adequate waste receptacles, but also this really being an opportunity for food service as well as alcohol service, and melding the two. So it's not just about a beer garden kind of vibe or just drinking, but it's also really about socializing. And have there been considerations put into this work to sort of emphasize that side of it as well and encourage the consumption of food? And also, where are the opportunities to, I appreciate the context around how this bylaw works and how it needs to be very specific in accordance with the Act, and it has to designate the space and the time and the location, et cetera. Where are the opportunities for finessing this as it goes along and really being responsive as we see needs to change and how we can pilot this for future opportunities.
With respect to food servicing, the pop-up plazas in general, the road reallocation that we've been doing, we do see this, the ability for these specific locations to allow for public consumption of alcohol to be an additional tool for that. So the pop-up plazas, whether or not it does offer alcohol consumption or not, there is seating out there, and the idea being is that the businesses can really morph their model around allowing takeout. So somebody could go there, buy food, bring it over to this plaza. If it is one of the locations that allows alcohol, they can bring their own alcohol there for that. That was a critical part that we illustrated in the expression of interest for the businesses to consider for the locations, to see if it was an addition as a tool for supporting the businesses, the ones that are interested in that takeout model.
Okay. And for opportunities to expand on this pilot or finesse things as it moves along?
Thank you. From a finessing, there's a few things that we could finesse as far as like the data that we're collecting through that. We could adjust and respond to additional information that is needed within the site, let's say for signage, additional cleaning. This really is part of the learning that we're looking to do. How we resource this is really going to be dependent on the uses and the behaviors and what we see out there. So I do see us having the ability to adjust and respond to that. And we will be collecting the data both from the observational based, where we are seeing the uses that are out there, and then the other elements of data we will be reporting back to council, and that will be an ability to inform long-term decision making around this.
Okay. Lastly, with regard to some of the concerns expressed around the hours for the North Plaza, and you know, I'm a little worried that it precludes the sort of lunch and focuses really on the post-happy hour kind of timing with 4 to 9. And I'm not sure that meets the sort of objective of like enjoying food and socializing as opposed to just pounding them back before going to the club or whatever. Do you think that there's any potential to really just manage that plaza experience in the event of a protest or demonstration or some kind of other activity, and just kind of turn it on and off? Is that an opportunity?
Hi, thank you. This is Margaret Witkins. And, you know, there have been a number of questions about the hours restrictions, and just as a general piece of feedback on that, really what we were seeking to do is to reduce the overlap between those two types of activities that were generating concern by the VPD. Ultimately, you know, there are ways that those hours could be refined, and that's, you know, what we're bringing forward for decision today. I would say the management of it, and Deputy Chief Chow may want to weigh in on this as well. The management of that interface would be more a question of resources that would go into having those two things coexist, and again, emphasizing that this is certainly a pilot that we expect to learn a lot from, how those activities work together.
Okay, I understand. Thanks, Ms. Witkins. I guess with nobody else on the list, I'd be happy to move this, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Point of procedure, Mr. Mayor. Don't we have a speaker to hear first?
Yes, you're right. You're totally right. Thanks. We do have a speaker. Council, this meeting was only scheduled to go till 5, and we're just hearing from speakers now, so I'll need a motion to extend
So moved, Councillor
finish the business. Thank you. A seconder for that?
Councillor Bly.
Seconded, good. Okay, we need yeas and nays, and we do need 2/3 of a vote, 2/3 to extend, just so you know. All in favor of extension to finish this special council meeting, say yay.
Yay.
And opposed, say nay. There we go. Okay, thanks very much. So now that we're finished with questions from council, we're going to move on to speakers, and I know we have one speaker on the list. Let's see here. Just looking. Right. We have Andrew Nakazawa. Is Mr. Nakazawa on the line?
Oh, you can hear me? Your line is open. Go ahead. Perfect.
Thanks for calling in. Please go ahead.
Oh, good. Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Andrew Nakazawa. I'm speaking on behalf of the Downtown Vancouver BIA, and I manage our placemaking and public spaces program. So I'm speaking in support of the recommendations in this report, with our preference that there be consistent hours. That's 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. for all 4 locations. So that's keeping the 11 to 9 or something close to that for Squanicook Square, at least to start with for the pilot. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge and thank city staff and council for all the time and effort that has gone into all of the various COVID-19 response and recovery initiatives, this pilot included, which are going a long way to help support local business recovery as well as local residents during this unprecedented time. As cities and urban life evolve, we need to explore new ideas and test out innovative concepts, which can be done through pilots. This is even more important now given the challenges presented by this pandemic and COVID-19. So the DVBA, as has already been mentioned, we suggested 2 of the 4 locations that we felt would be suitable for the pilot. Squanicook Square, also known as the North Plaza of the Art Gallery, and Lot 19. Both of these spaces are centrally located downtown with easy access by foot, cycling, and transit access, and are already popular public space destinations for people to simply take a rest, eat their lunch, or enjoy the weather or people watch. Allowing anyone to bring an alcoholic beverage with a takeout meal, for example, would help to further make these spaces an attractive alternative to dining indoors, which many people are still cautious of at this time. As was mentioned in the presentation by Lisa, we've recently collaborated with the city as well as worked with the Vancouver Art Gallery to implement the bright blue public picnic tables that are on the square now that were launched on July 4th, which have been quite successful. And we have been also activating and stewarding seasonal programming at Lot 19 for the past 6+ years. So we are very familiar with both these public spaces, and existing monitoring and stewardship is already ongoing for both those spaces. Given that we already activate and are currently monitoring both spaces, adding the alcohol consumption pilot to these locations made sense. Just like any public project intervention or interaction that we do or that we initiate, we always identify potential issues or challenges and do our best to mitigate these concerns and plan accordingly. We apply our own experience, incorporate stakeholder input, and plan for it accordingly. But we never fully know how a new activation or public installation will be received, how it will be used, how it could be misused. That's exactly what a pilot is for, to try new things, to monitor the progress, adjust as needed, and use the outcomes to help inform future decisions. Maybe it's expanded to other sites. Maybe certain locations don't perform as well as was first thought, and maybe some are made permanent because they were quite successful. But you really don't know until you try them. In closing, with my notes here, the DVBA is happy to continue to collaborate with the city as well as local stakeholders to make these pilots work, and I'll leave it there and open for any questions.
Thank you so much. I don't see anybody on the queue to ask you questions, but would like to thank you so much for calling in and participating today. So that's it for registered speakers, I believe. Clerk, is that right?
Mayor Stewart, this is the clerk here. Yes, it was just one speaker.
Great. Okay, thanks so much. So we can go back again to Council if you have any additional questions. Anybody else on the queue here? I don't see anybody on the queue. Okay, so Councillor Fry, if you wanted to move this again, or whoever wants to move it.
Thanks, Mayor. Happy to move the...
Seconder?
Bly? Second.
Okay, I think I heard Councillor Bly. Great, so we're on the main queue now if anybody wants to debate this matter. Councillor Bly, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I just want to say thanks to staff for turning this around so quick. As we've stated, I realize that this is a delicate introduction in intense times. So, but all that being said, I do have an amendment that I've moved that I can see the clerk has pulled up on the screen. So I'm not sure if we will move to an amendment queue or...
No, not yet. I am actually going to take a look at this and just to make sure it's in order.
Sure.
And I'll have to get back to council. Just going to take a look at it, and I'll come back to you shortly. Let's say just take, if you give me 5 minutes, I'll be back at 5 after 5 at the latest.
Just wonder if someone can stop my timer.
And if folks could mute as well, that would be great. Thanks. Bly, you can continue.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just wait for the amendment to come back up on the screen. Here we go. So the amendment essentially is that council directs staff to report back in Q2 2021 on the feasibility of enabling licensed restaurants to allow patrons to consume an alcoholic beverage while waiting for a table immediately adjacent to the food establishment. And this to me is reflective of the comments that I made when we initially discussed or debated this motion, and what I believe is the value behind this motion in terms of supporting local business, small business recovery, limited capacity, limited ability to serve those that are sitting in their restaurants and tables, and being able to manage actually supporting the community through local business, manage and still serve patrons on a limited basis. So I'm moving this amendment. I hope it's supported. I think that actually when I look at the concerns some people have raised, some other councils have raised, rightly so, like around bathrooms, for example, concerns around people consuming too much alcohol. You know, businesses have bathrooms. They have a responsibility to serve their patrons. They have laws not to overserve folks. My fear here is that the motion or the report without an amendment like this is limited. A pilot really needs to test the actual intent of an initiative, and I think this doesn't go, it's not that it doesn't go far enough, I think it's gone in a different direction than I saw the motion going, and really the benefit of the motion in terms of a quick turnaround and providing this kind of support to our local businesses. So I'm hoping that the amendment can be added as part of the discovery that will happen with this pilot and can inform future decisions on what we will do with this initiative, and just to create a more robust engagement and information gathering as we go through this process.
Councillor Dominato.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dominato. Just to remind Council, we do have a public hearing at 6 o'clock. And just so you know that, and we're on the amendment queue now. Councillor Boyle, up to 5 minutes for debate.
Thanks. So, well, I appreciate hearing from Councillor Bly about the intent. Well, actually, I'm going to start, if you'll allow it, with a point of information through the chair to staff, which is I'm interested just to get a sense of how complicated they think this piece of work would be in terms of all the legal pieces and how much work it would be for staff.
Thank you, City Manager.
Thanks, yeah, Mr. Mayor. I think the key thing will be the jurisdictional issues. I mean, we've seen with the Park Board, with their pilot, the province is key to it, and the province would be key to this as well. So really, we would need to start with the province to determine whether there was interest for them to change the regulations. And if there was, then we could kind of proceed with the work. So I think that's really the major factor with this. But Sarah Hicks is available as well. Sarah, do you want to jump in on kind of the amount of work this might involve? And don't forget to unmute, Sarah.
Sorry, yes, testing to make sure you can hear me.
We can.
Great. This is Sarah Hicks. I'm the Deputy Chief License Inspector. Currently, the provincial regulations wouldn't allow an open plaza to be able to be serviced by a restaurant. Their requirements are that there's a red line. That is the area within which a restaurant that is licensed can serve product, and they have to maintain full control over that area. So we would need to work with them to see whether or not that was something that could shift within the current framework.
Okay, I appreciate hearing that. So I think I'll just say, as Council has heard me say before, I am concerned about the number of the amount of work that we have been sending to staff, and I think to some degree we just need to be able to prioritize that. And so while I'm not necessarily against this happening, it's not a priority for me in the huge array of work that we have to do out of recovery. I'm happy to see the recommendations the staff have laid out before us. There's a important equity piece, I think, in people being able to come into that space and bring their own alcohol or get takeout from a restaurant to support those businesses. But it's not a priority for me to add this additional piece of staff to the piece of work to the already very full plate of our staff right now. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor DeGenova.
I haven't spoken yet, Mr. Mayor.
I know that you're on, though.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make sure. Sorry. My connection was just lost, by the way. So if you lose me again, I will try reconnecting. Mr. Mayor, I just had a question. Trying to understand, this speaks to specific pilot areas, and you said this is in order. So is this amendment only around restaurants, I suppose, in those pilot areas? Or is it across the whole city?
Sorry, your question's directed to who?
That's a point of information, Mr. Mayor, to you, because you had said this is in order. I'm just wondering is this now included in restaurants across the whole city that have patio permits? Or is it
I don't have any idea.
Pilot
I don't have any idea, Councillor DeGenova. I mean, I was hoping we just deal with the issue at hand, but now we seem to have opened up an entirely new issue. But I would direct that to the mover.
I don't have any amendments, Mr. Mayor. So yeah,
you have
I'm flying. I'm trying to.
You could direct your information, your question to the mover of the amendment, if you like.
Okay. Councillor Bly, I'm trying to find a way to support this, but right now we're looking at these particular pilot areas, and that's all that's included. We've been talking about the rest of the city on and off throughout debate and discussion and questions on this motion. I'm wondering if you could please tell me, just, do you expect this to be the whole city, or do you expect this to just be near the pilot locations?
No, I would expect it to be a broader discussion with the province. I don't think they're going to be concerned about our pilot locations.
Okay. So I'm going to come off the queue for right now, Mr. Mayor. I may go back on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support this amendment because I see it supporting local small businesses, and I'll offer the perspective, and I wish I could remember the jurisdiction I was in. I can't recall if it was San Francisco, New York, or overseas when I was living there, but I recall waiting in line for a restaurant where I was served a small glass of wine. People stick around as opposed to, you've showed up and, there's a 20-minute wait. And it wasn't about a plaza. I think staff talked about an adjacent plaza. That's not what it was about. It was you're waiting in line immediately outside the restaurant. And you were offered a drink while you were waiting. And that was essentially it. It was, and so it seems reasonable. And turning the report back on the feasibility of looking at it, if staff come back and say it's too much work or it's not feasible because of provincial laws, well, then we'll hear back. But it is simply a report back, so I support it.
Thank you. Councillor DeGenova?
No, Mr. Mayor, that's fine. You can take me off the queue for now.
Okay, Councillor Kirby-Young?
Hi, thank you. A couple of quick comments in the interest of time. I lived in Montreal, so I've lived in places and spaces where this is commonplace, and it's not here, and I think a lot of it does relate to our provincial laws and regulations, and I am supportive of supporting our small business. And so I think it's a valid thing to explore, and I'll support for that reason. I will note, however, that I feel that we're really mixing apples and oranges in this discussion, and this should have come in a different forum because we are considering a bylaw implementation today for what was professed to be, based on the direction that Council gave, a pilot to enable BYOB with the rationale and the goal of equity, and that people did not have to pay to attend a restaurant if they didn't have means or they didn't, people are financially strapped and not everybody could afford that. And so to me, that was very clearly the direction that was given to staff around pilot locations from an equity perspective, which I think we strayed far from. And I think this is a very different topic. So I think that for me, it's a good learning that I think we should bring these things forward in a different form or a different way. And because it is very, very distinct from the notion of equity in terms of people not having to purchase something and being able to BYB in other public spaces. So they're very distinct. It doesn't mean that it's not valid. And I do support our small business, so I will support it for that reason, but I'm hopeful that we can try to kind of clean up the mechanism of how we bring these things forward in future. Thank you.
Councillor Hardwick?
I'm confused. I thought we were looking at having pilots in proposed locations that are laid out in this report. And this amendment is, to me, I think I heard Councillor Kirby-Yung refer to as apples and oranges. These are completely different things. I fail to see how it can be in order, but you say it's in order, Mr. Mayor, so I'll have to go along with that. I don't have a problem with talking about this in another context, but it seems like we're bolting something on to a report and a motion that are unrelated and not in sync. And, I have a really hard time voting in favor of something that seems not completely unrelated, but tangential to the core question here, which is about approving a number of defined pilot locations for this bylaw. I'm sure that Councillor Bly has a reason for doing this and logic to do it, and maybe I can ask through you what the rationale is. Again, it's sort of here's the bylaw. We're looking at making these changes for a certain number of pilots that have been defined, and there's been all this work that staff's done about this, but all of a sudden now we're going to do this too. So I'm having trouble understanding that. So am I able to ask a question through you, Mr. Mayor, back to Councillor Bly, the mover of the amendment, of how she's connecting these, and hopefully she's hearing what I'm saying about my difficulty in reconciling the two.
Yes, you absolutely can ask a point of information. So, Councillor Bly, do you have a response?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to the original intent of the motion. Now we're looking at a report of staff who have accurately interpreted the motion and have zeroed in on a pilot. We didn't know it would be 4 spaces. We didn't know where they would be. And much of the discussion around this motion initially was much broader around supporting small business at a time during COVID. That was specific. I don't see how this motion or this report from staff fully does that. So this is to open it up and broaden the focus, because essentially where the umbrella that it falls under is drinking in public spaces and how we do that. So that is the logic that I have for it, and I explained the rationale when I moved, so I don't want to repeat myself.
Councillor Hart.
Okay, we're not here to debate it, but I'm not finding it easy to connect the dots, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to ask you, this is not a challenge, it's a point of information. I'm wondering if you could share with us the rationale for this being in order, or if possible, if I'm not sure if it was law or the clerk who gave you a ruling, if they could share the rationale, if you feel that that's appropriate. It's just, as Councillor Hardwick's noted, we've been in this situation before, and we've been told that this is incorrect for the reason that it doesn't particularly pertain to the motion, as Councillor Kirby-Yung noted. So I'm just trying to, in hearing their comments, just wanted to process sort of in what way it was called.
Yep. Well, as you know, Council, we have a ton of amendments, and how when I'm chairing what I do, if it's a minor amendment like a word correction or date or something, I don't review it because it's usually not applicable. When it's a larger amendment, I'm now automatically reviewing all of them. So that's why I took the time that I did. What I asked legal was, is this allowed under the special council meeting? We're really only supposed to be considering ideas that are or amendments that are germane to the topic which we're discussing. So to me, and it was, legally it is. So legally it's in order. The question for me as chair is it closely enough related to our topic to include it? And, it's a little gray, but as chair, I think it's closely enough related to continue with the debate. Although, again, I would prefer these things often to come as separate motions, so we can, they're not kind of surprises. It is in order. So, and here we are in the debate. So I hope that.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's helpful.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned the public didn't have a chance to see this
Sure.
and write in and comment. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to call the question on the amendment.
Okay. Well, you don't really need to do that because you're the last speaker, so I'll just call the vote if that's all right. Is that okay? So we don't have to go to two votes. We can just do one. Councillor Dominato?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Right, clerk. So I'm just going to pull up the vote now for this amendment. Councillor Fry, Councillor Dejanova, Councillor Wiebe.
Conflict.
Sorry, yes. Councillor Fry, Councillor Dejanova. Councillor Fry? Councillor Fry? Clerks, do we have Councillor Fry on the line? Also hearing typing in the back, so if you could just make sure you mute. Clerks, if we get Councillor Fry.
Mayor Stewart is the clerk here. We do see him on the WebEx, but he is not responding, so we'll attempt to call him.
Okay, Council. We'll just have to wait. If Councillor Fry, if you can hear this and you've dropped offline, if you could, happy to give you a vote assist if that's helpful.
I'm sorry, folks. I didn't realize we'd reconvened.
Oh yeah, we've reconvened for about 20 minutes, I think.
Oh my goodness, sorry. I had my headset on mute.
Okay. Right. So we are.
We're voting on the amendment in yellow.
Yes, and we're just waiting for your vote.
Thank you.
Okay, that's passed with Councillor Boyle in opposition. Thanks, Council. We're back to the main queue. Councillor Bly, anything else?
That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova, anything else?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. We have the amended motion now. That's what we're speaking to.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I'd submitted an amendment to the clerk.
Okay.
And as we're pulling that up, that's just altering the time for the plaza to lunchtime. So changing it from 4 p.m. to 12 p.m. And appreciating the input from the VPD and the concerns around protests and mixed use and stuff, but also recognizing that a lot of activity for the downtown business district is occurring at lunchtime, and there's lots of folks who might want to do this kind of activity during lunchtime, and really in the effort of encouraging not just kind of happy hour or pounding them back before the bar kind of activities, but actually more sort of social activity that might enjoy food as well. It seems to me that lunchtime is a good time for that, and it's a good location for that. Recognizing that this is a pilot, if it does indeed become a problem, I'm confident that this can be adjusted to fit based on some of the comments from staff.
Okay. Thanks, Council. We need a seconder for this.
Second, Councillor Bly.
Okay, we're on an amendment queue, Council. Anybody wish to speak to this? Councillor Dejanova, please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I was just hoping to be able to ask a point of information.
Sure can.
To staff, but I'd like to specifically, I have two questions. The first is, I'm wondering if our staff can clarify, was Good Night Out and Bar Watch involved in the consultation for this to come forward?
To the staff.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I could ask Margaret to outline who, or Lisa, who was included in the consultation.
Yes, so this is Margaret. Thank you for the question. And with the limited time to pull this together, we have not done detailed engagement with those groups. However, they would be involved in the development of the management plan following approval of council. And so they are kind of amongst the list of individual groups that we've identified to engage as part of that process.
Okay, so the groups that were included in our liquor review in 36 recommendations, those groups, none of them have been, except for the Downtown BIA, have been consulted? Is that correct?
Or staff?
Yes, so our engagement within kind of the time frame that we had focused on Vancouver Coastal Health, VPD, and working with the local BIAs who have a strong understanding of the local context. And we certainly recognize that that's not an idealized engagement process for kind of a fulsome pilot. And we're needing to make trade-offs around the time it would take to do that versus getting it back to council in the summer. And certainly appreciate that as a pilot, this will form part of the engagement that we would then use to bring back recommendations over the long term. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank staff. I understand that you've really tried to do a lot with the little time that you've had to bring this back. So try not to be critical at all, because I know you have done your best, and you would have done more if you had more time, as I've heard you say. I have a question for the VPD also, but I suppose I have a question for our staff. Has Vancouver Coastal Health said, first of all, to our staff, through their engagement, that they're concerned at all about emergency room hours? Like, for instance, I'm not sure if between 12 and 4 is a time that they'd be concerned about, or on certain days. But considering the very convincing arguments of Dr. Daly when she spoke to us and talking about the spike in that, I'm just wondering if, and I have another question for VPD, so just hoping for a short answer. Do you have any information on that?
In the discussion, Lisa here, in the discussion with Vancouver Coastal Health, there was not specific feedback around the time of day. The spike was more in a discussion around the COVID component, like the time period that we're in as opposed to the time of day.
Okay. Thanks very much. Really appreciate that. And then I suppose a question to the Vancouver Police Department, if there's any concern, I suppose on a couple of fronts, and the ones that I'm looking at are thinking about drinking and driving. Or driving while, I guess it's under the influence or impaired, as well as are there any other concerns specifically with extending these times?
Yeah, the drinking driving would be a concern. It's Howard again here. Drinking and driving would be a concern, as you know, with any liquor licensed premise as well. And the time, and I got to say, it's it's to Margaret and Lisa and her group. I mean, they're trying to thread a needle to just help out with our concerns that we raised. So, I mean, the shortening of the time was simply to try to mitigate. And I mean, the reality is our concerns is these pop-up protests. It's difficult to tell when they will occur. Our summer months, obviously, we have more protests, to the tune of about 3 to 4 a week, and we do have that faction that clashes. On the more problematic protests, and that's where our concern lies. So the timing was unfair to throw it on Lisa and Margaret's group. It was simply to help out what our concerns were.
Thanks very Mark Deputy Chief Chow. I know 20 seconds left. I won't be able to support this amendment, and I understand that, often the phrase is used, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but it starts at 4, and I think that that's well before 5 o'clock, and for the reasons that I've heard, and the fact that we have not consulted stakeholders, which concerns me overall for the entire motion, I won't be able to support this amendment. Thanks.
Thank you. That's it for speakers on this one, Council. So I'm going to call a vote on this timing change. Clerks, if you could pull that up for us. Waiting for, that's it. Okay, that has passed with Councillor Kirby-Yung, Hardwick, and DeGenova in opposition. We're back at the main queue. Councillor Fry, anything else?
I'm good, thanks, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Bly.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just wanted to do my best to address the impression I had. I've gone back and looked at the original motion, and just to Councillor Hardwick's questions around where this is coming from. Of the original motion, D states that Council directs staff to report back as soon as possible, fast-track priority actions and locations as pilot projects. And then D of D says supporting restaurants and patios where limited occupancy might necessitate wait times to enter. So that was my impression of this motion in its entirety, and it's the piece that I feel was missing in the staff report back, which is the logic for me moving the amendment to address the motion in its entirety. My final 30 seconds, I have some real concerns, to be quite honest, around the proposal of 4 areas. I'll support it because it's very short in terms of timing. It's not what I had in mind, to be quite honest, when I went through this process as my sort of responsibility as a councillor to look at all the different angles. I fear people will go pick up alcohol, sit in these areas, and drink, and that really wasn't what I see as sort of a balanced approach. I think the Montreal example in London is just where there's a little bit more freedom and autonomy and less control, that people just manage themselves and act like adults most of the time. So I think we've just made decisions around policing that this is going to add to the work that they have to do. All that being said, I'm willing to support it. I appreciate my amendment passed and it's in there, and so I feel like it's going to have more teeth in the long run. So I'll be supporting.
Thanks. I have myself on the list. Put my timer on. It actually is for a point of information to staff. So this is a pilot project. Just in terms of, I've called this special meeting today to enact this. What I'm wondering about is what happens if this pilot starts to go horribly wrong? I did have a conversation with Dr. Daly today about this. She, again, cautioned against this, as she had in the past, Doctor has in the past about making alcohol more accessible. But I'm wondering if we find, the police report to us, there's a wide-scale abuse of it or something, what are, could I yank this, or could we reconvene a special council meeting to yank this if it's going badly?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thanks. We would definitely be prepared to convene an additional emergency council meeting if we needed to make changes or stop what we're the program. So at this point, we would be happy to do that, and we will certainly be monitoring it and working closely with all of the partners that have been discussed today.
Okay. That's great. That's all I needed to know. Thanks very much. And I'll take myself off the queue and turn over to Councillor Kirby-Yung.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I will support this. I had reservations in the beginning. I will go back and make a couple comments I made when Council was considering the earlier discussion around enabling
Sorry, Councillor Kirby-Yung, we've lost you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better? Okay. I just harken back quickly to the earlier discussions that we had around whether it was encouraging the Park Board and the advocacy motion for their initiative moving forward, or this separate conversation around city use and public space. And I really think in the height of summer, when it's hot outside, what people really want is the ability to have a brew in their local park and to do it close to home, not to have to travel to specific sites. And I think that one of the reasons I was concerned about this pilot was I think, pragmatism, that we had a limited amount of time and a lot on our plate this summer, and the ability to roll something out from an equity perspective, as well as to meet people's expectations, was going to be challenged. And I think, honestly, that's where we are now. I don't think this is ultimately what people were looking for. They were looking for something that was much more neighborhood-based and in the parks and beaches, and would rather have seen the city try to put all of our efforts into supporting the park board through their jurisdictional challenges and trying to, knock that one out of the park, so to speak, pun intended, and deliver it, because I think this has now become something else. It's limited. It doesn't sort of check the equity box. It's unique. It's great use of public space. It's going to be a short period of time, but it doesn't check the equity perspective. You're putting one at Lot 19 into a highly exclusive residential neighborhood with people that probably all have their own balconies, or probably not going to feel the need to BYOB down into that location. It may be a nice augmentation to placemaking and public space in downtown. And that is not a bad thing. And I'm a huge supporter of public space, but I don't think it meets the intent of the motion, which was to, sort of reach out to people that didn't have the ability to spend in restaurants or to be close to their respective and individual neighborhoods and where they can walk. The notion of complete communities, the responsibility about drinking and driving. I have concerns that we keep asking for professional advice and we keep ignoring it as it relates to hours. So I wonder why. And I think sometimes we need to just pull back a little bit and figure out when to do something well, and be pragmatic about it. I think that, VPD probably in providing that advice recognize that they have less officers on the streets. They run 4 different shifts a day. There's one daytime shift, but there are 3 that start overlapping and starting around 4 p.m. when officers come on board. So I think there's a whole lot of considerations and context to go in there. I don't foresee that we're going to have any major issues, knock on wood, and have some problems, but I think we have to be really realistic about what this is going to deliver and what it's not going to deliver. And at the end of the day, I think what Vancouverites want is to be able to go out and enjoy the parks and beaches in what is now luckily a beautiful summer with lovely weather outside. And that's what we should be encouraging and trying to enable our park board to get through their hurdles and their issues on that one. So those are my comments.
Thanks. I put myself back on the list, and Councillor Fry, if you could just take the floor while I just start my clock.
Sure thing. Happy to do.
Thanks very much. I'm going to support this pilot, but there's a couple of concerns I have. First of all, we're in the middle of COVID-19. Like we're in a pandemic, and staff have been stretched to the breaking point since March. We have been putting a ton of pressure on staff to deliver over and over and over again, and here they are again delivering something in a very short time frame because we as council are demanding this, which I think, and here we are in a special council meeting crammed in right before a public hearing in order to get this stuff passed through. And I do think when we have a break, we should all reflect over what we're doing here as a council. There does seem to be a mad scramble to get everything in that we can pile on, and the impacts on staff are significant. So I hope that over the August break we can just take a look at this and not come back in September with another 20 motions for us to work through as we're trying to deal with the business of council here. That said, I think there has been demand for the public, and I think this pilot hits it right on the mark. I think that staff have done the best they can in a short period of time, and they've given us something that we can actually test. So I think that's a good thing. I do very much heed the advice of the police and of the Vancouver Coastal Health, and we'll monitor this both through the VPD and staff to see how it's going. If there are any problems, I'll be calling council back for a special council meeting to stop this, because we are the collector of the region. Other municipalities have done some work on this, but they're not downtown Vancouver. And so we'll have to really monitor this. But that's what I'll be doing over the summer, and I will be letting you know how it's going, council. So that said, I'll support this because I really think pilots are the way forward, especially when we're trying new things. And I think the public want us to try new things. However, I would say that redlining it all the time is not a good practice. So I hope we're more cautious when we come back in the fall, because we'll still have COVID and we'll still have all kinds of challenges. And remember, our staff are still working from home. They're mostly not in their offices. They're or very few are in their offices. This is very, very taxing time. So just wanted to say that. Okay, thanks. Councillor Fry, can I have the chair back and I'll turn it over to you?
Please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fry, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, and I just reflecting on some of the mayor's comments and Councillor Kirby-Young's comments, both actually. I do want to say that when this motion was first introduced by Councillors Wiebe and I, this was back in May, and that was a full 2 months ago. And I think, you know, it was not to pile on the work so much as recognizing that there really was a gap. And at that time, we didn't see a route forward with the park board passing their bylaw for drinking in public. It's now looking like that might not happen until next year. And we certainly did see that there was an equity gap here for a variety of reasons, not the least of which for restaurants that can't accommodate patios, for folks who may feel over-policed in public parks drinking in the de facto yet illegal context, and for distribution throughout our city and for equitable access throughout the neighborhood. So in many respects, you know, I'm disappointed that these pilots are just focusing in largely the downtown area and the one location in Mount Pleasant. But I also recognize that staff are working full tilt, and I really appreciate the work that went into this. I know this is a complicated kind of bylaw enactment, and it's certainly with the delays in rejecting and then revisiting this motion, that added an extra, or took away 2 months of potential work time on this. So I certainly appreciate that staff really pulled out the stops to make this complicated bylaw revision work in the context of the Liquor Control Act. And I'm hopeful. I've been paying attention to what's happening over in North Vancouver, and so far the sky has not fallen, and the North Van City is still standing proud and tall on the North Shore of Vancouver. So I think that this is a pilot that will hopefully yield some more successful opportunities for this kind of thing and more equitably distributed throughout our city in the future. But I do recognize that won't be today, that won't be this summer, and I really want to close in expressing my gratitude for the hard work that staff did to get us here in the first place, and thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to also thank staff and ask for all 4 sections to be, 4 parts to be severed for separate vote, please. And I wanted to say that I'm not going to hold this up because, unfortunately, and I do agree with you, Mr. Mayor, there's a way to do this, and there's a way not to say we need everything now, and that's one of the reasons that I'd moved the Piazza motion back during Italian Heritage Month in 2019 in hopes that that would move forward in a year with a pilot and vendors and restaurants that had serving it right. You know, I'm very proud of my Italian heritage and growing up sort of in that lifestyle of, you know, that liquor isn't a focus. It's not something that you know, I would say in many European cultures, people go out and start binge drinking at a certain age. And, you know, I look at that just through my own experience. I understand other people have different experiences, and I certainly am not a medical doctor. So when Dr. Daly says something, I listen to that. And Dr. Daly has said that this will increase emergency room visits. This will increase drinking. This could possibly be harmful. Again, this is a pilot, so there are parts of this that I can carefully support. There are other parts of this that I'm going to have a hard time with, the extended hours. That's not what our staff budgeted here. That's not what they came back to us with. And that's not a part of their recommendations. And I respect what they brought us. So that's what I am going to support, knowing that, you know, even the police have an issue with that right now, but are willing to work with that in a pilot situation. I think that maybe we've romanticized, you know, drinking. And when I think about equity, you know, that's when I bring up the question of cigarette smoking, and renters can't possibly do it if possibly homeowners might have opportunities that renters don't. So I think that we really have to look at equity across the board through a fair and equal lens for all drugs and alcohol then, and others have brought that up. That being said, you know, I support people being able to have a drink outside a restaurant if they're waiting, but not at the expense of someone in a wheelchair not being able to get by, not at the expense of strollers not being able to find their way through. That being said, that's being asked it's being asked for staff to look at that and bring it back. Concerned about the amount of work, but I can support that. I won't be able to support the extended hours, but I really do want to thank staff, and I appreciate that staff did really try as hard as they could given the time and the demands that council has placed upon them with the Italian Piazza, and appreciate the city manager's comments. We'll be taking that offline with him because I know the Italian community, if they can't move forward this time around with that original motion, would like to do so next year. And sometimes I think it's about doing it right. It's not about doing it now, it's about doing it right. Because if this is a pilot, I want to make sure that, as you said, Mr. Mayor, that we don't have to come back here, or perhaps there's a special council meeting called and we don't have quorum. So that's a concern I have to think about too. So I'll be supporting parts of this motion. There's other parts that I'll abstain or not be able to support. But I really want to thank everyone involved, including Vancouver Coastal Health. I really want to thank the Vancouver Police Department and especially our staff. Ms. Wickens, all of our engineering staff, Ms. Parker, for all of the work and dedication that you and your teams and so many others that I won't have time to name here today have really worked hard to get it to this point. So fingers crossed, things will go well. And again, I won't be voting on the extended pilot, but it starts at 4, so it will be 5 o'clock somewhere. Thanks.
Councilor Kirby-Yung, up to 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll be quick. There's something I wanted to mention earlier, and it was really triggered by something that the mayor commented on about the fact that we're redlining our staff. And I had meant to mention, and I really want to emphasize this, that I think we're coming to the point where council needs to make some choices. And when I hear $10,000 to $20,000 per site times 4 sites, or $40,000 to $80,000, I appreciate that that's an estimate. And I sit in a budget session and I hear that we have financial difficulty in reopening all of our libraries, but $50,000 could reopen 2 libraries in much needed parts of the city that are really underserved. I think, and then I think about things like the fact we cut the additional allocation that we had, which was, in my view, badly needed towards sanitation. And we are hearing from residents via every channel right now, whether it's email, in the news, on social media, about the impacts of social issues and sanitation, especially concerned during a health pandemic and the impacts there. I think we're going to have to really pull back and prioritize. And so it worries me that we are moving forward in a lot of initiatives without really helping to zero in both from a staff resourcing perspective and a budgetary perspective. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, because I will be championing to do things like opening our libraries. And if we're $50,000 short and we spent $50,000 on this, was that a good use of funds? Well, I guess council and the public can decide, but those are the choices that are facing us, and they are very real ones. If people right now down near Strathcona are reporting in the news today that they're having people try to break into their doors, or they found, 20 needles in the morning and in their front garden, and we've cut sanitation, but we're spending $40,000 to $80,000 on 4, BYOB plazas. Those are choices. Thank you.
Okay, Council. So I guess we can call a vote on this one.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I've asked.
Oh, we're not done yet.
Privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, just 1 second here. Okay. Okay. So, staff, if we can put the clauses on the screen for the severing. There we go. So, clerks will just vote on the 4 different paragraphs. Is that sound about right? Okay. There we go. So the highlighted in yellow council will vote on that. Councilor DeGenova.
Mr. Mayor, my voting panel is loading. If I could get a vote assist in favor, please.
Okay, thank you. That is passed with none opposed. And we'll go to the second paragraph. Just wait for the clerks to highlight that. Actually, clerks, I think, we shouldn't forget to also display the votes to the public when we get a chance. Vote assist, Councilor DeGenova.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's still loading. If in opposition, please.
Okay. Councillor Dominato. Thank you. That has passed with Councillor Hardwick and Councillor DeGenova in opposition. And the voting results. Thank you. And we're going to move to the third paragraph. Clerks, just take your time, making sure don't feel rushed. And that has passed with Councillor Boyle in opposition, and the fourth and final. So we put the Clerks Club, the voting screen there, and we're going to go to the fourth and final vote. Council, that has passed with Councillor Kirby-Yung, Hardwick, and DeGenova in opposition. Okay, Council. So we have one bylaw on the agenda for consideration by Council that was subject to the approval of item 1. Any member wish to hold the bylaw item 2 for debate, separate vote, or for conflict of interest? Like to hold this, or if not, would someone like to move the adoption of bylaw 2? Right. Move. Thank you. The seconder.
Councillor DeGenova.
Thanks very much. Any discussion? I'm just going to the voting queue here. I don't see anybody in the queue to speak, so I'm just going to call yeas and nays on this bylaw. All in favor say yay.
Yay.
Opposed say nay. Thanks very much. That carries unanimously, and the bylaw can be found on the city's website in its entirety shortly. So this concludes today's special council meeting agenda. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Councillor DeGenova.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. And all in favor, say aye. Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Opposed, say nay. Okay, Council, the special council meeting is adjourned. It is 6 minutes to 6. Council, by law, we have to start the public hearings as scheduled. So I would say just because of the technical side of things, we should come back at 6:20, and that should so please be ready to go in the public hearing at 6:20, and that will make sure that we get started with quorum to meet the quasi-judicial regulations of that hearing.
Point of privilege, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councillor DeGenova.
Could the clerks tweet that out and also put that up on the screen just in case anyone believes that we're starting at 6?
Sure, yeah, it'll be on the live stream, I'm sure. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Council, so we'll see you shortly.